And first thing in the morning, people usually are the early birds. So I hope you have your coffee, because what I did is I put a slideshow together of just some of what's going on in the world so that we could have a greater perspective on what's going on, because we must all know, without even being told, that we're living through some very pressurous and intense times. You know, we're being asked to make a stand, to commit, to make the change happen that we've talked about for a long time. But planets come together at certain times, you know, historically, and you can go back and look at planetary alignments historically to see what was happening 37, 100, 500 years ago at similar junctions in where we are now. And then you'll get an idea and a perspective on what's expected of us. So one thing I want to say right off the bat before we start, thank you, Cindy, for having me. That's the first thing. And good morning to all you beautiful women. Thank you. If there's a guy here, I don't know it. I don't see it. And, you know, you were made for these times. And consciously, prior to this, if we were to delve into the records of our Akasha, we have made this conscious decision to come here at a time that is not the easiest time in the universe. You know, hopefully some of you got to live through some better times. I know I did, you know, times that were slightly more carefree. But this is a time in all time and space that's asking a lot of us right now. And there is no right way or wrong way on how to show up. I know that oftentimes activists expect everybody to be active, meditators expect everybody to meditate, kirtan singers expect everyone to do kirtan, governmental people expect law and order or whatever. But the truth is that this is so particular to your time of birth, to when you took your first breath and said hello to the world. You had already in your mind's eye a mandala-like picture of what you wanted to achieve this lifetime. And there isn't a blanket, everybody does it the same way. But what's important is that you look at the greatest growth and greatest evolution of your own personal astrology chart and show up where you are meant to show up. So, although we are in a time of listening, I think we should all know that. So the spiritual perspectives of our collective astrological journey, these are the times that we're in, and I'm going to go really fast because I call it the Evelyn Woods Speed Astrology. And for some reason, my thing is not going. Okay, hang on one second. Anybody have a clue on this? There we go. Okay, so just quickly, astrology is a bridge from the science to the mysticism. It's a roadmap to give you an idea of how the psyche is wired. Astrology is the study of time through a symbolic language. It's the cosmic finger by which we read the divine thoughts. Astrology means logos, words, knowledge. It is the logic of the universe. And it claims that we are a living organism and part of a larger fabric, as above, so below. Our movements are astrological. The earth moves around the sun predictably. We have seasons somewhat predictably, at least before global warming. But astronomy gives names to the stars, the celestial objects and the planets. Astrology gives meanings to those things that have been named. Ancient people studied the stars thousands of years ago. They noticed that the sun, the moon, and the planets used them for navigating, planting, and ceremonies. They grouped the stars in constellations and gave them names and meanings. There are over 250 billion stars in the Milky Way. And what's fascinating about that is so many of those stars have been named. And there's another branch of astrology called fixed star astrology. And for instance, the Venus of Prince Charles sits on the fixed star Camilla. So, I mean, there are certain things that are written in our destiny. The fixed star of dance, Michael Jackson had his Venus, his Mars right on that fixed star. So beyond what we know with just the planets and the astrology chart, there are so many different branches of astrology. So the planets in our solar system revolve around the sun, and the sun revolves around the center of the Milky Way galaxy. It takes about 225 to 250 years to revolve once around the galaxy, and this length of time is called a cosmic year. I always like to say, you know, we're here on Earth, you know, Earth school, and we have a computer that we play with, but the divine, all that there is, the mother, father, goddess, plays with a bigger computer. And so if we were able to step outside of our lifetime on Earth, we would see these bigger perspectives. So anybody born roughly at 26 degrees of Sagittarius, within give or take the last 5 degrees, is said to be aligned with the galactic center of our universe. So that's roughly December 19th through the 21st. Could be 17th. For some reason, I can't always see everything on the screen. The ancient Greeks named the cosmos, which literally translated means jewels. So I call my work Sky of Jewels. Planets mean wanderers, and the galaxy literally means milk. I remember when I was a free-roaming hippie chick in Greece when I was about 19. I spent about 3 months there. I'd go to the coffee shop, and I would have Nescafe Migala Kezakari, because Gala is milk. It's the milk of the universe, of our galaxy. So the Wheel of History, tracking the spirit of the ages, this is just to give you an idea. I don't know if we're going to get to send you a copy of this, but I'm happy to do that for anybody who wants to have a deeper look at this later on, because I will be talking fast. So right now we're in the age of Pisces. We are finishing up the last few hundred years of the age of Pisces. And a year in spirit in the heavens is 2,000 plus years. So we are nearing the ending of a world age. And whenever you near the end of a world age, you feel the shock point, because life as we know it is changing. Our historical memories carried over by our souls from another era are ending. We're going into a new age, so to say. And these planets have synodic cycles. They dance together. I think I missed a slide, but maybe we'll hang on 1 second. Well, what I want to say before we go forward on this is that we have this remarkable thing happening at the end of this year on December 18th, December 19th, and it's going to be a new synodic cycle. So synodic cycles are two planets having an interaction or interchange with each other. They come together, they do what's called the conjunction, they're together, then they open up and have a square and an opposition and a closing square. And all of these cycles are relative in the terms of history. So even though we're in the age of Pisces, we're not going to go into the age of Aquarius for roughly 250 more years. We are moving into a synodic cycle with Jupiter and Saturn at the end of this year in the sign of Aquarius, and it will be in the sign of air signs every single 20-year period they come together. And so we are going into a new synodic cycle of air. For the last 200 plus years, we've been in Earth, and everything's been about materialism, the Industrial Revolution, keeping up with the Jones. And now mentally, we're going into a time of more social alignment, hopefully for the betterment of all people as we grow through those cycles. But the point is even though we're not yet in the age of Aquarius, we are kind of gently moving into the age of Aquarius. Well, we'll see if it's gently at the end of this year. So we have these synodic astrology cycles, but even in reference to the sun. So like Saturn goes around the heavens around the sun every 29 years, Pluto around every 248 years, Neptune every 165 years. So there are cycles within cycles that are always interweaving and nesting in one another. And all of this has meaning. It gives meaning to how we progress as human consciousness, as people. So planetary passages give meaning to our current zeitgeist, and the zeitgeist is the defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history shown by the ideas and beliefs of time. So if you think about this, it takes roughly, just to go around the zodiacal cycle, around 26,000 years. Within that period, we will never have the exact same chart. And even if we come to a period where the planets are aligned the same way, we're living in a different age and a different time. So we're always moving forward. Now, 2020 marks a pivotal change for our home planet Earth, as well as our cosmic reality. And it's marking the end of an era and an initiation into a new era filled with golden opportunities. But remember, whenever we're changing over our cycles, the people who have been living in those cycles for a while, who are so attached to those cycles, we have to drag them screaming and kicking, or they're going to have to transform into another life form, on another planet, in another realm. So any cultural trend that begins under outer planet conjunctions, and that means when two planets are together, they will resurrect and reform under subsequent squares, oppositions. And so it can take, let's say, for instance, Saturn and Pluto come together as a conjunction roughly every 37 years, where Neptune and Pluto may be every 495 years. So as it goes through its synodic cycle, it makes all these different aspects, cultural aspects. And those are the ways we learn that history repeats itself. It repeats itself by the same aspect. We're working out the same angst or the same social shift that we need to make, but we're living in a different time. So I'm going to describe a couple of these cycles. As I describe them, they'll make sense to you. One of my favorites to talk about is the ambassadors of the galaxy. So from 577 to 574, give or take a decade in there occurred a conjunction of the planets Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Now, those are the three outermost planets that we know of, let's just say, as of this time. And they formed in the sign of Taurus. Now, this is really important because this is not going to happen again till about 3600 AD. This is a rare triple conjunction that took place. And nobody knew it because they didn't have telescopes that showed that, unless there were extraterrestrials on the planet telling us all about this. So it sparked an awakening in the human consciousness that forever changed the scope of history, as I'm now going to show you. This happens roughly every 120,000 years. But at that time, within that decade, we had Greek rationalism, the Buddha was born, Taoism, Confucianism, Lao Tzu, Zoroastrianism, the Jewish Old Testament was written, pre-Columbian architecture, pyramids, transatlantic voyages, Pythagoras, Ezekiel were all on the planet, Panini composed the Sanskrit grammar, and so much more, all within this short period. But what's important to recognize about that is that we still find all of this relevant. It is relevant. It's not a passing fad or something that just disappeared off the planet. I mean, we have Buddhists and we have people following the Old Testament. We follow Lao Tzu or Confucius or whatever. Now, the point is that these three planets will come together in different patterns throughout this 120,000 year cycle. They will just never conjunct on top of each other at the same degree until around 3600 AD. So that's a pretty big thing that's a pretty long cycle. You will have smaller cycles of Uranus to Pluto, like we did in the 60s, or Neptune to Pluto, like we did in the 50s, different cycles that come together. So it's really fascinating. But every time they come together, they bring some sort of a conscious shift. So when these things happened in the 60s and all three of these planets were in harmony with each other, the 60s were a time everybody talks about. Sure, it was the Vietnam War and some great unrest, but it was also the civil rights movement, and it was also the Beatles, the Animals, the Rolling Stones, and all these other great things that took place on the planet. We were planting gardens. We found the Whole Earth catalog. It was cool to be a hippie. I wish I would have saved my genes. So when Uranus and Neptune come together, which is a smaller cycle, they come together every 171 years, they stress the wider horizons of a world made one through the discoveries of science and the tremendous increase in human interchanges. So this is a really neat thing to think about. The last time Uranus and Neptune came together as a conjunction was 1991-92. And what happened that changed the whole scope of human interchange at that time? The computer. It brought the world together. And prior to that, 171 years earlier, we had the locomotive going from sea to shining sea across Europe, all of those things. And 171 years even before that time, we had the invention of the steam engine, which increased the amount of transatlantic voyages, or just intercontinental voyages. So these planets are messengers in the heavens that bring us this tremendous shift and change. Some changes you might remember in your life: anytime Saturn comes together with Neptune, roughly every 36 years. Hang on, something was on my page. Saturn rules walls and lead. Neptune rules water and dissolution, among other things. Saturn also rules government. So the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, within a few days of the exact conjunction, which occurs every 36 years. So that's Neptune creating the dissolution of the Berlin Wall, and Reagan saying to Gorbachev, tear down that wall. And then we had the Flint, Michigan crisis. I forgot the year on that. That wasn't too long ago. Was a closing square between Saturn and Neptune. So you have the conjunction, the opening conjunction, the opposition, then the closing square before it becomes a conjunction again. So it's part of the dance that these planets play together. So we have water, which is Neptune, and we have lead in the water, and Saturn rules lead. So the way to predict how these things are going to happen, it's not enough to know that these aspects are happening. Then you have to take a look at all the different countries' charts and all the different states within the country and all the different cities within the country. This is a branch of astrology called mundane astrology, the astrology of the world. And it's a very tough thing to do. It's something I'm very interested in, and I only touch the surface of it, but it's a full-time job. You have to be able to give up your full-time job to do this full-time job. So at the same time that we had the Flint, Michigan crisis, Neptune rules the pot industry. It rules marijuana, which is interesting because Neptune is in Pisces, which is its home sign. But 80 some years ago, when it was in its fall sign, which was the sign of Virgo, that's when we illegalized pot. But anyways, government's ruled by Saturn. And so this last cycle of Saturn with Neptune, Big Pharma looked for ways it could capitalize on this industry. Okay, give me a second here. It's doing it again. There we go. This is one of my favorite cycles to talk about because it's just so cool. So Saturn is very conservative. It's very right-wing. It's very staid. It's what we've done forever, and therefore we'll do it again. But Uranus is change. And sometimes the change is good change, and sometimes the change is so unpredictable, but it always brings into the consciousness what we really need. So you could have Uranus. I did a chart for a guy last night who had Uranus at his midheaven, which is his career point, and his whole career fell apart that he had for the last 30, 40 years. But it's going to open him up to do what he always wanted to do. And sometimes we don't see it. And again, we're kicking and screaming. But Saturn and Uranus together bring into the human realm all types of new ideas, inventions, recycled from older ideas. They are the shock of the established systems of our time. So on November 9th, 2008, which was election day, there was an exact opposition in the heavens between Uranus and Saturn, conservative Saturn to progressive Uranus. And you might have remembered that Barack Obama was running against John McCain, who was a Republican. And even though he was a good guy comparatively to what we're dealing with right now, his values were more conservative. And Barack Obama ran on the premise of change. And by the way, in astrology, Saturn rules black. So we had a black president elected at that time, which was really exciting. And there's that little paragraph that does not go there, that went somewhere else, but we'll leave it for now. That's what happens when you put things together quickly. So in the heavens, we just finished up big squares between Uranus and Pluto. And this marked an evolutionary leap for our species. Technological prototypes for the future of humans themselves have changed. You're seeing this with stem cells. And this was roughly the last 10, 12 years of our lives. The last couple, we moved into a new phase. We call that phase the storms of history, Uranus squaring Pluto. It was a cultural revolution from 2010 to 2000, I think it says 18, so roughly 18. Uranus was in the sign of Aries, which is the lightning bolt, Prometheus, it's the god of fire, and it was igniting the flames of inspiration for real freedom. But Uranus in Aries is also youth rebellions. And so at that time we were initiated with the Arab Spring. Pluto in Capricorn's the corporate god of the underworld, the dark deeds of government, corporate greed, and banking. We had our big banking scandals, but we also had sex scandals in the Catholic Church because Pluto rules sex and Capricorn rules government and the Catholic Church. So it was an interesting time to be on the planet nonetheless. We saw this dynamic duo bringing together the Arab Spring, the Great Tsunami, Hurricane Katrina, Fukushima, great fires, power outages, mudslides, and so much more. And so many of us were like, when is this going to end? Is this the way it's going to be? Now, don't lose heart. You were made for these times. And each and every one of you here this morning, thank you for being with me, even if it's a little intense of a conversation. You were made for these times. You consciously chose to be here. On a bell curve, you're in front of the bell curve, and you're helping all those people to who don't understand yet, to understand where we're going, to understand that it's okay and that we all have a very important role to play at this time. So even though I've seen so many people just feel like they want to leave the planet, just breathe through this, because we will have these great configurations with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto that's going to bring this great cultural conscious revolution. That's going to take place roughly from 2024 through 2028. So it's worth the waiting for. If you like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all the great stuff that came out of the 60s, you're going to like the new stuff that's going to come out of the middle of the 2020s. It's getting there. That's the big things. So we just had Uranus go into the sign of Taurus. Uranus changes signs every 7 years, and every time it changes signs, it's going to bring a new revolution in the sign it's in. And Taurus has a very deep connection to the Mother Earth, the environment, her precious metals and resources. Also our food and nurturing, the mother aspect. So Uranus is going to stay in Taurus till April 25th, 2026, and will not return until 2102, which I'm suspecting most of us may not be here for that, unless you're so attuned to the Tibetan cycles of living for 120 years. Taurus rules money, so you're going to see new aspects about Taurus and finances, abundance, material security. It's going to bring a whole new many new financial opportunities. The Bitcoin we've seen the last couple years, cryptocurrency, everything's going to change. Uranus rules computers and electricity, and the world that we thought we knew is shifting and changing. One big cycle that we have going on, and we're not going to cover the whole thing today, just snippets, is the chart of the United States. Has Pluto, when it was founded in 1776, in the sign of Capricorn at 27 degrees Capricorn. Now Pluto makes a revolution around the sign of the sun every 248 years. And when it comes back to this Pluto, which is going to be in 2 to 3 years, you are going to see new possibilities. We are experiencing a financial crisis. These things always come in a few years prior when they're big cycles, but we're also going to have opportunities to change these things. And maybe our money structure is going to change too. You know, they might get rid of the nickel. I hope they don't. I like nickels. I don't know why. The most futuristic gourmet experience. This is another Uranus and Taurus. Taurus rules food. Uranus is the revolution. All of a sudden we have computers that are actually, and printers that are actually able to print out food, which is absolutely insane. So they're already launched in different cities like London, but this will be coming here soon using a 3D printer. Uranus and Taurus is the embodiment revolution of the divine feminine. And it takes us back to the age of Taurus, the Copper Age. But this is a picture of Isis feeding Horus breast milk because it has everything to do with natural nurturing. Now, I always like to throw this slide up when I'm doing a lecture because I did a lecture like 3 or 4 years ago when I was talking about going into Uranus into Taurus. And I had put up a slide about La Leche League because I'm a big proponent of La Leche League, a big fan. Breast is best. But the founder of La Leche League, which is an international organization in about 188 countries, was founded by Marion Thomas, who's native to Chicago. She's living up in Evanston. And so she has the North Node in Taurus conjunct Chiron, the wounded healer. She was here to teach how to heal the wound of separating the baby from the breast. By the way, she showed up at one of my lectures when I was doing this. So it was a big honor and a big thrill. A little cycle we're going through with the Uranus. We're not going to get into the whole thing, but in South Korea, the transiting Uranus was being squared by Mars and conjuncted by conjuncting their North Node, which represents their greatest growth and evolution. So in South Korea, it was a fundamental, what do you call it? A fundamental expectation that every day women would get up and for 2 hours they would condition their face, condition their hair, put on makeup. This transiting Uranus is like pulling the rug out from under this whole cultural, all right, one more sip of coffee and I'll get the right words. But this whole mindset that they've had for decades, you know, South Korea leads the world in beauty and makeup. And what happened is a movement came up called Escape the Corset, where this movement challenged the sexual objectification of women, but also the status of women as being subordinate to men in South Korea. So they're experiencing their liberation, which is what Uranus is all about. And all these women say, my life is not your porn. They start putting bowls on their head and cutting their hair around, and they threw their makeup on the ground. There's lots of YouTube videos on that where they're crushing their makeup. So it's pretty cool. So we all look for divine signs on our path. Without these divine signs, this is how we actually feel. Yet we rather feel like the highest version of ourselves. We ask for signs and signs are sent, even if it's light cracking through a door. Here's a picture of Leonard Cohen. He says, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. Things do not need to be perfect. There is a crack and a message in everything. That's how the light gets in. So where we're going right now, did anyone have any questions thus far? Are we good? I'll just assume we're good. Okay. Right now on January.
Dawn.
Yeah.
Dawn.
Yes. Did anybody have a question?
Are you able to unmute people, Dawn, as the co-host? I think we do have some questions.
Okay, I will try that. Hang on, let me figure that out. Okay. Oh, no. Give me a second there, everyone.
Take your time.
Okay, I see what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not a techo person, so it takes me a minute. Okay, but where am I going?
It's just the red mics, the
Okay.
little red mics on participants.
Okay.
You click participants.
I'm clicking on, like I'm on Ellen right now, and it says ask to unmute. Then I'm going to go to Debbie. It says, but it's not doing anything.
It's not unclicking.
I
Okay.
think maybe if the person has to unmute, because my computer said the host wants you to unmute. So I'm not sure about that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I guess if you need to unmute yourself
Yes,
for a
thank you very
question.
much. Okay, was there a
Thanks,
question
Debbie.
before I go on? Because I know we don't have a long time, and I've got probably another 15 slides to race through.
It's awesome. Go in.
It's called Evelyn Wood's Speed Astrology. Okay, so January 12th, 2020, Saturn and Pluto began a new synodic cycle. The previous one was November 7th, 1982. I want to bring up a point on this. So I had talked about the conjunction of the cycle. That's what happened in January 2020. We can see on this chart that there were a whole bunch of planets at roughly 22 degrees of Capricorn, but this is where the Saturn and Pluto were exact. And it was a really hard period for us. Many of us were having a really hard time. We felt like we were stuck in the mud, and Capricorn rules mud. But a half cycle before this was the opposition between Saturn and Pluto. And to the day, to the exact degree of the chart of the United States, is when we had 2011, September 9th, or 2001, September 11th, 2001, when the World Trade Center was bombed. And it just opened up, it broke down old structures. We never thought that we could be attacked on our own, home plate. Okay, so it's going to dredge up old personal patterns personally, but our best efforts are to form new structures to allow the old ones to fade away, yet staying resilient and persistent in the face of this opposition. Otherwise, things are out of control. There has been grief. There's been grief for every one of us. I'll just quickly say this South Node Jupiter conjunction you see on the chart of China was sitting right on their 12th house. At the eclipse, it was 5 degrees, so it happened on December 25th on the eclipse, opposing what you can't see here, or you can see Hades in the North Node. Hades is bacteria and viruses. So if we had time, I could show you all these slides to show you how the eclipses went through Wuhan, China, and all this stuff. But that was our first hearing of the virus for the world. Okay, so, but with a sustained effort through the challenges, by the end of 2020, we will have made significant progress towards our life goals. We have to work on ourselves. This is an incredibly potent period of life where we can plant the seeds we want to see develop. By doing this, they'll last for a long time because Saturn is all about long-term cycles. So Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. This month, by the way, we have 7 out of 8 retrogrades that are possible. So June is a month to get through, to breathe, to do this conscious meditation and the kirtans and everything else. So important to build that energy as opposed to the energy of fear. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I just want to say one of the big patterns of discord to watch is going to be September 10th through November 15th. Because that's when we get the Mars retrograde, and the Mars retrograde is going to form a square to everything here. Before we get there, I wanted to show, I don't know if we could see this here. Here's the planet Eris, and Eris is the goddess of discord, and she's forming a 90-degree angle to Pluto and Saturn, and now Jupiter too, because Jupiter's part of the picture in our present chart. So we are in a tough time. We're in a really tough time, and we have to show up. And we also have to remember, anxiety on the outside is inflammation on the inside. So go to the beach, get some fresh negative ions, do your kirtans. So coming to a planet near you, we're going through right now at the end of this year, the grand conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. We are going to be in air signs for the next 200 years. I had already explained that we have been in earth signs for the past 200 plus years, which was all about keeping up with the Jones and material comfort. Now we're going to start thinking globally and socially. And we've got just the president who makes us want to think that way to get out of this. So this cycle is going to begin on December 19th, 2020. Remember, a cycle in air like this has not happened since 1365. We have not been in air since 1365. I'll send everybody a copy of these slides so you could see um, the general themes as we were going through fire and humanistic philosophy and air artistic flourishing, water artistic flourishing and the spiritual movement. But right now we're going into the air element and the signs of Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. We're going to start in Aquarius. And what this means is every time Jupiter forms a conjunction with Saturn, every 20 years, it's going to be in an air sign for the next 240 years. And then it ushers in the age of Aquarius. See, we are the forebearers of this. We are the way showers bringing people to this point. So our consciousness makes a huge difference. So prominent people of that time, Fibonacci, Khayyam, Alberto Magnus, Marco Polo, St. Francis, and others. Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius is the air trinity. We're past the age of heroes, where there's an individual savior that's going to come along and save us. Now it's about community. It's about groupthink. And on some level, Obama, who I think he was a Leo, I can't remember, or no, he's an Aquarius with the Leo rising. I mean, he was bringing in that social respectability within the world stage. And this is where we're really going to. And now we have the complete opposite. I mean, we had some light, now we have the complete darkness. But now it's about community pulling together. You guys are ahead of the curve. Remember I said that, ahead of the curve. You know, the last 20, 30 years, you guys have been doing this work. You've been ahead of the curve, making it comfortable for people to know this is the direction they have to go. So welcome to the age of Aquarius. We are nearing the end of this cycle and entering the age of Aquarius. It's a stepping stone into the new age. Uh-oh. I'm missing some of my slides. Ugh. Okay, maybe I'm not. Let's ask questions. I think I am. This is terrible. Or maybe I just went too fast. Does anybody have any questions? Because I could keep talking, and I guess that I will. So let me just comprise myself for a second. So we're going into this new shift, and this is a hard year. This is going to be a really, really hard year. I did not go into the presidential elections or anything, but I will say that election day 2020, and it may be a real shitstorm, and I guess that you guys should expect for this to happen. In the chart of the United States, we have Mercury at 24 degrees of Cancer. And let me go to those charts. Hang on. And it's going to be opposed. It's being opposed right now by the Pluto, the Saturn, and now the Jupiter, which is in this mix. Now, Mercury rules communications. It rules paper. It rules the post office, and it rules your right to vote. And all of these things are being challenged by the current administration. And this is a very, very big deal. So this is probably because it will be squared by the Mars when election day comes up. By the way, election day 2020 is going to have a retrograde Mars. And Mars can rule the youth and the radical youth, whether it's Antifa, whether it's let me admit somebody here, just a second. Whether it's Antifa, whether it's the Boogaloos, whoever it is, whether it's just people standing up at a protest and hopefully a peaceful protest. But it's going to be pretty big. We also have a Mercury retrograde that day. So we are going into some very, very important times in the history of our world. But as we come to the end of this year, the whole focus is going to start to be on social change. Now, we will see to what degree our election gets stalled. I think it's interesting. We always look from a mundane perspective at the chart of Washington, D.C. right before the election. And there are signs that show that Trump is going to win again. And I know that nobody here wants to hear this, but I'm thinking with Uranus sitting at the bottom of the chart in the election day chart, which I do not have up here, that there is going to be a revolution, and the revolution may change it. I saw signs in the chart of Trump that he would have to leave in January. I don't know if he's moving to Mar-a-Lago or if we're going to have to get the military in there to bring him out. One thing that's interesting in the chart of election day, the chart of the new moon before the election in Washington, D.C., is at the top of the chart, we have 3 degrees of Sagittarius. In the chart I don't have up, by the way. And that is the rising sign of Joe Biden. So I'm hoping that Joe Biden can rise to this occasion and pick the right running mate. I think this is where I'm supposed to be right now until we get to the next person. Cindy, are you there by any chance?
Yes, I am.
And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Remember, your soul has lived through these times before. This isn't your first rodeo. So it is a matter of doing what you know to do. Ground yourself, eat the right foods, put your feet on the earth, clear, cleanse, and just be the wise, the wise wisdom that everybody is needing and seeking at this time. People come to these periods and they think it's the end of the world, but it doesn't have to be. It's always darkest before the dawn. Did I hear a question? If you're muted, you can unmute and I'm happy to talk to you.
And so anyone that's interested in contacting Dawn, her information is in the chat. So, because you work with people one-on-one too with this.
I
right?
do. This is what I do all day long. And if I didn't need to make a living, I would do more of this mundane astrology and I'd put it into perspective for people. But it takes a lot of understanding history and it takes a lot of time. But I do charts and I love to look at your chart and see if you're living your best life ever and giving you the best timing cycles in your astrology chart, when the doors are open, when you should wait, when you shouldn't put down all that money, when you need to see clearer, sign contracts, not sign contracts, sell houses, whatever it is. I do things on a personal level. So I would be honored to work with anybody and everybody, anyone. See the fly in that? I love that. When I took that picture and I didn't know it, there was a fly on my rose quartz. Anyways, I'll even do the chart for a fly if they remember their birth time. Thank you, everybody. Namaste.
Oh,
Much love to everyone.
Dawn, I
Yeah.
think we have